Hello everyone. The purpose of this brief presentation is to understand, appreciate, and celebrate the achievements of African American inventor Garrett A. Morgan in order to promote multiculturalism in the classroom setting. So say you have a class that is half white and half black. Talking about a person like Garrett A. Morgan, who is an African American, would engage the interest of the African American students and also gain their respect. And this is essential for the classroom setting today because those old history textbooks, they focus too much on the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant view of history. Too many white people compared to not as many black people presented in these textbooks. And this does not make education multicultural. It only focuses on one group of people and the good things that they did. And when they talk about these other groups, it mainly is in a negative fashion. So this is a positive promotion of a different culture. So to begin, we'll talk about Garrett A. Morgan's early life. He was born March 4th, 1877 in Paris, Kentucky, and he concurrently went to elementary school while also supporting his family on the farm, which was typical of a lot of African Americans during this time, especially in the southern state like Kentucky. And his parents used to be slaves, but the Civil War ended that. And considering the time that he was born, it was just 12 years after the Civil War. His parents, they endured all the hardships of slavery, and the farm helped them to survive as free people. But Morgan, who was said to be always quite intelligent, he migrated to Cincinnati, Ohio, while he was a young adult to fulfill his potential. And it was in this somewhat northern city that he was able to find employment and make a living while continuing to learn. He was such a smart kid that he was able to get a job and further his education. And at age 18, he finally moved to Cleveland to become a repairman for a local sewing business. And he worked for this local sewing business, and this was the start of a long list of accomplishments for Morgan. He went on to form his own sewing company, and a company that produced hygienic materials, and even established his own newspaper company. And he became one of the wealthiest men in the North, quite an accomplishment for an African American man whose parents were slaves. And here he was, in the age of the Industrial Revolution, with names of white men that schools talk about, such as Andrew Carnegie and Henry Clay Frick. But the African American man, Garrett A. Morgan, was protruding through this white barrier of history to become a wealthy African American. And this is why we need to talk about this man, because we're dominated with this white Anglo-Saxon Protestant view, like Carnegie, like Frick. Why isn't Morgan in this conversation? This is why I'm tackling this issue today. So now, some of Morgan's inventions that he was able to make. So Morgan loved inventing things. He had man-made designs for his businesses, and he was always quite good at it. And along with his inventions for the workplace, he created inventions that benefited society as well. And perhaps the most famous invention of Garrett Morgan was the traffic light. Yes, he was the man who invented the traffic light. Morgan was one of the few individuals who owned a motorized vehicle at the time. And being that they were just invented, and he saw a car accident firsthand, he wanted to make society safe. It was because of this moment where the little light bulb in Morgan's head shone brightly, and he was determined to create this traffic light. And on November 20th, 1923, Morgan's traffic light was successfully installed and utilized for the first time. You see the first example of the traffic light to the right of your screen there, and a very much different view than what we would think of what it was. Morgan was crossing the racial boundaries at his time. In a time where typically the white man was only able to be extraordinarily wealthy, Morgan was changing this. In America, specifically African Americans, were noticing the change. His product was being incorporated all over the United States, not just in the North, but also in the racially motivated South. Figure that. People of the Deep South were using this invention. It was created by a black man. It would be interesting to go back in time, say to the 1960s, where the civil rights movement was just dominating the South. And it would be interesting to tell people of the Deep South that a black man had created the traffic light. Something that they use every day, that a black man created it. You wonder how much chaos that would cause. You wonder how many people would actually ride in their cars that day, because they're using an invention that was created by a black man at the time. But many people do not know and did not know that a black man invented this device it was saving thousands of lives at the time. And this was not the very first appearance of the traffic light, but Morgan's version was different and more efficient. And before the traffic lights accidents were a common occurrence every single day. And with this invention, Morgan was making American roads safe and industrializing transportation. And he created a patent for it that was priced at $40,000, which is an astronomical amount of money at that time. So he had such an impact on society, and he was focused on saving lives. He witnessed the death in the accident he saw earlier, and he did not want that to happen anymore. So he was convinced, he was motivated that he wanted to help society, and he didn't see himself as a black son of slave parents. He saw himself as a man, and that's how textbooks should teach this stuff, but they neglect to do this. And this is why we need to celebrate the accomplishments of people like Garrett A. Morgan. Morgan's additional inventions was the Morgan National Safety Hood. This is also known as the gas mask. And he invented this when people needed to be rescued underneath of Lake Erie. He unleashed a gas mask and was able to save 8 people, actually, and he could do what the search crews could not. People were first skeptical of Morgan's new invention, but at this moment, when they needed to save these people, the skin color did not matter. All that mattered was that a human was called, even though Morgan happened to be African American, a human was called to save other humans from disaster. And the person who called Morgan, he did not care for his race. He just got what he thought he could do. And Morgan received praise from people at that site. However, there were newspapers that attempted to cover the disaster the next day. They neglected to say who saved the 8 men, so no one knew. I'm assuming everyone thought it was a white man, but despite that, Morgan saved lives of the white men in need. And at this moment in time in Cleveland and Lake Erie, black and white were one. Now, I understand it wasn't the racially motivated South, but still, this is a significant moment where black and white were one. A black man was saving white citizens from this danger underneath Lake Erie. And here you see a picture of Morgan. He is right there. So he's the only African American in the picture. And then you see the man he's saving right here. And there is Morgan's hood right here, right behind his head. It kind of looks like a brown bag just with holes in it. But no, it did the job. It did the job well. So Morgan received so much praise for this, and he was able to do the job. But not a black man is in this photo besides Morgan. So it proves my point that black and white were one at this moment. They did not care about his race. He just wanted him to save these men, no matter what their race was. Another additional invention for Garrett A. Morgan was titled G.A. Morgan's hair refiner. And when he was working on a machine in a sewing company, Morgan wiped the additional oil from his hands onto a cloth before he was going to eat lunch. And without even thinking of inventing anything new, really, Morgan came back from his station to discover that the hairs on the cloth of the wiping cloth that he wiped his hands on, they were well groomed from the oil. And he decided this might be able to work as a hair product, but in order to sell it to the market right away, Morgan had to test it. And he used a neighborhood dog for the test. Don't worry, the dog was not harmed, and it worked just as expected. And he knew for sure that it would be a great grooming product for males and females, really. And he finally sold it to market for anyone to purchase. And this proves that Morgan was altruistic with all his inventions. He did not limit them to a specific race or ethnicity. I don't believe that was his purpose. He wanted anyone, black or white, to use his products. Whatever the case was, they usually enjoyed the product. And then you see here, this is the ad for this hair refiner. And you can tell from this ad that he was very proud of his black heritage. He's pictured, I think that's him pictured on it, but he did not have to put himself in this ad, but he's proud of his black race. I don't know if this product was sold in the South because of this depiction in the ad, but you could tell that Morgan was happy to be an African American, happy to help these people, happy to make them feel better about themselves. So now we'll move on to the multicultural aspects, why this can be implemented into a classroom that should be multicultural, especially with the diverse population today. And one of the ways in which the story of Garrett Morgan can promote multiculturalism in the classroom is through his combating of racism. I don't know how much racism he exactly experienced, but the fact that he was African American in a white-dominated society is significant, and he was doing these inventions to benefit not just the white community, but everyone in general, and this is significant. And in schools today, racism, it plays a part in the lives of many students. And if we teach kids the story of Morgan and his national safetyhood and how it unified society and brought them together to save those people, then they can understand how to come together as one. They can understand how to unify together and possibly promote a safer neighborhood and a safer world by working together. And according to the textbook Multicultural Education in a Pluralistic Society by Donna Golnick and Philip Chin, one of the principles of a multicultural education is to acknowledge life histories and experiences of students and their families through culturally responsive teaching. So this basically means that in order to connect to all cultures in the classroom, a teacher needs to integrate those cultures into the curriculum. So while learning about people like Thomas Edison and Ben Franklin and Alexander Graham Bell, all famous, renowned inventors, the name Garrett A. Morgan should be incorporated into this lesson. And African American students can have pride in this inventor who saved lives with his inventions and sold to all people in a commercial audience. Don't just focus on the slavery aspect in history. Focus on celebrate these achievements of different cultures, especially in a classroom in a large city where you can have a large African American population. Celebrate these achievements from renowned inventor Garrett A. Morgan. And this valuing of the African American culture allows for a greater appreciation for African American inventors, especially one who changed the world basically like Morgan did. And the last thing that a teacher could incorporate into the classroom could be less emphasis on the Eurocentric people from American history. They're important, but stop focusing just on the Eurocentrism and focus on all cultures and integrate them into the classroom. And I'm not saying that those people are not important, but nowadays teachers need to value culture over curriculum to gain students' trust and interest. So a lesson like this one could help. And Garrett Morgan was an African American inventor who not only helped the whites, but he helped the Latinos, he helped the Mexicans, the Asians, the Europeans, and Middle Easterners who were all in the United States at this time with his inventions. And that is multicultural, and we need to talk about Morgan, celebrate his accomplishments for a multicultural setting. And this just doesn't happen today, but I really hope that it can change. And here's my works cited page. You can see if anyone wants to take a look at that. So that basically wraps it up. If anyone has any questions or comments, please do not hesitate. Please comment below. I will try to do my best to answer questions and respond to comments. But please make them appropriate because this is a public setting. But I'll try to comment as fast as I can if possible. So thanks for watching, everybody.